So the last thing we spoke about was the whole concept of tzimtzum, which is a very fundamental concept in the Torah of the Arizal, Kisvei Arizal. It's not mentioned really elsewhere. As I mentioned before, the Ramak does not talk about the end of tzimtzum. Torah tzimtzum lo yada. He didn't know about the Torah of tzimtzum, says the Arizal. However, in the interpretation of the Arizal, there's four primary different shittos, different approaches to understanding the Arizal. I forgot to mention this for Refuah Shleima and Malaya of Yaakov Chaim Moshe ben Freda. Should have a Refuah Shleima. Okay, so to continue, there's four shittas in the Arizal. And the Rebbe explains that they're divided into two main inyonim. One is whether the tzimtzum is in atzmus or only in the or. Whether the tzimtzum is in the atzmus or only in the or Ein Sof. And whether the tzimtzum is kipshutoi or not kipshutoi. I'll explain a little bit more what kipshutoi and not kipshutoi means before we get on to the next section, just to finish off this inyan. So, whether the tzimtzum is in atzmus or not in atzmus, so there's a machlokas. And it comes down that there are four shittas. The Gra, certainly the Yosher Levav, which is Emmanuel Chai Riki, was the author of the sefer called Yosher Levav, and the Leshem. The Leshem was written by a Talmud Chacham and a Makubal named Rabbi Yoshiv, right? The great-grandfather of the Rabbi Yoshiv from Yerushalayim. So he wrote in the Leshem that the tzimtzum is kipshutoi and tzinatzmus. And so did Emmanuel Chai Riki. And the way the Rebbe says, the Gra also held that way. The Gaon of Vilna also held the same way. However, his Talmud, the Nefesh HaChaim, Rechaim Volozhin, holds that the tzimtzum is ba'atzmut, but it's not kipshutoi. In other words, it's only, it doesn't mean it literally, it only means it figuratively speaking. Right? Now, there's a sefer that came out recently where the sefer is called Nefesh HaTzimtzum, where he tries to explain that the Gra Shita is like the Alter Rebbe Shita. Right? I don't think he succeeds, frankly. I haven't looked at the book in depth yet, but I just looked at some of the parts that were available to me. But it seems to me that he hasn't succeeded in improving his case. But I'm glad that they want to show that the Shita of the Gra is like the Shita of the Alter Rebbe, which I'm very happy that we've come to that conclusion. All right, so those were those two Shitas. Now, those two Shitas again, that the Tzimtzum is in Atzmus, but according to the Yosher Levav and the Leshem, and according to some, the Gra, it's kipshutoi in Atzmus, and according to the Rechaim Volozhin, it's in Atzmus, but not kipshutoi. It's only meant figuratively or not literally. The second Shita, that it's only in the Oyer, so there's Rabbi Yonasan Eberschutz in Yaro's Dvash, Rabbi Yonasan Eberschutz, who says that the tzimtzum is only in the or, but it's kipshutoi. The or was literally removed. And then comes the shit of Alter Rebbe that the tzimtzum is not kipshutoi, and it's only in the or. Right? In other words, it's only helem or and not siluk or. That's the shit of Alter Rebbe. Okay. Now, yeah, four shittas. There may be other shittas that, but those are the ones that the Rebbe lists, and I don't think it's possible that there could be other shittas, but I'm not sure that there are. So I'm just saying that there's, primarily four. It's all based on the Arizal. It's all based on the Arizal. It's an explanation of what the Arizal said. Because Arizal said there's a silek is atzmoi el atzadim, and be'emtza ha'or shelo. So where was the siluk? Was it the or, and was it siluk? Was it helem? Was it? So there's different Lashonis of Arizal that come out in different ways, and it's hard to know exactly what it was that the Arizal was saying, but the Alter Rebbe explains that for sure he was saying it like the Alter Rebbe says. Why? Because otherwise, where's Yiddishkeit? Ein oid milvado, right? Mloichel aret kvoidoi, and it's a shemaim es ani malay, ani ba'atzmi, right? And many other psukim that show the same thing. Leis asar panui minay, says the Zohar. There's no place devoid of him, atzmusoi. So it can't be that atzmus was besiluk, not pshitus and not shiloki pshitus. Okay. In any event, how does this come out? The point that we have to focus on is what the end result of that was. Not today. What we're going to focus on is not on the various shittas themselves, but on what the result of the Alter Rebbe's shitta is, because that's the shitta that we're going according to, and that's the shitta that I now want to explain that the Gra also held, and Reb Chaim of Volozhin. I want to explain everyone else the Alter Rebbe shitta, which is fine, and that's called his hapcha. That's the conversion into the MS. All right, good. So one of the texts which we have here in English, which is text number 18, says as follows. There are two characteristic expressions in Chassidus. A Jew recognizes godliness and senses the supernatural, and he needs no proofs for these. And B, a Jew neither wants nor is able to be sundered from godliness, to be separated from godliness. The truth is that these two expressions are one and the same. A Jew recognizes godliness and senses the higher than natural, and that is why he neither wants nor can he be torn away from godliness. In other words, because of the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'atzmoi, right, and kol shekain oiroi, his or, the or Ein Sof, are here all the time, and that's nirgash, it's felt by the neshama. Why? Because the neshama is chelek elokam imal, right? The neshama is a chelek of elokus. So a chelik of elokus in the highest madrega of the neshama, as we'll see later, there's 5 madregas of the neshama: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. Yechida is the highest level. Yechida leyachtach, as it says in the hakofas for Sukkot, in the third day. Yechida leyachtach. This is the yechida to unite you and be united with you, right? So that's the concept of yechida, and so the etzem of a neshama, at least the way the Arizal explains it, that Yechida is the etzem of the neshama. The truth is, in Chassidus Chabad, you have a madrega that is even beyond Yechida. Yechida is only that which is united with Hashem, but then the etzem haneshama is Elokam imal, right? It's part of God and never was separated, so it never can be rejoined, so to speak, right? In any event, Yechida leyachtach, the Indian of Yechida is aware of this Inyan. In other words, in the deepest subconscious of a Yid, in the deepest level, he is neshama, he's echad im HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore he recognizes godliness, and he senses that there's a supernatural. That's the natural state of thing, unless the mind has been trained to disregard it, which is most of academic education today. It trains the mind to disregard things which are regarded as sort of supernatural, right? But the natural teva of a person, the nature of a person, especially when a person is young, a child, naturally is aware of the divine presence. Naturally is aware of the divine presence. So a Jew recognizes godliness and senses the supernatural. And he doesn't need a proof of these things. Why does he not need a proof? Because this is part of his neshama. Or rather, let's put it this way, his neshama is part of God. So he doesn't need a proof. He doesn't need a proof that he exists. He doesn't need such a proof, right? He exists. Okay, and therefore, he does not want to be separated from godliness. There are many stories, unfortunately, many stories of people who survived the Holocaust that wanted to have nothing to do with Hashem. They wanted to have nothing to do with Hashem. And if you go and dig it down a little deeply, it's because of anger. I'm angry with God. How could he do this to me? In other words, it's a recognition that he's while I want to have nothing to do with him. But let's not go to the extreme cases. It's the natural teva of a neshama to want purpose in life. And that purpose is given to him by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, there's a reason that a person is here in this world, and we'll discuss this in later Shiurim. There's a reason that a person is here in this world. He was put here by HaKadosh Baruch Hu for a specific purpose. And that purpose is has to do with being Megale Elokus in the world, revealing godliness in the world. How do you reveal godliness in the world? Through the awareness of the neshama of God, and through Torah and mitzvahs. And okay, so the Rebbe also brings a very interesting story in Likutei Sichos, in text number 19. This is a story about one of the great Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, whose name is Rabbi Menachem Mendel. Now, he was a big businessman. He had a big business. His business was mainly lumber and wood. You know, they would float wood down the rivers and so on and so forth. There were lots and lots of forests in Russia, and they would sell wood, to all the countries in Europe and so on. They would float the logs down the river in the summer or whatever, in the spring and the summer. They would float these logs down. Anyway, he was a big dealer in lumber and in wood. And so he had a foreman that took care of the work, and he was like the boss. He was sitting in the office one day. One day the foreman brings him a bill of lading, I think it's called. How many trees they cut down and sent off down the river or whatever it is, and that he had to sign for. So there was whatever, and the labor involved and so on. There was a whole cheshbon, right? A calculation of whatever was involved. And then at the bottom, there was what's called the sach hakol, the sum total, right? Sum total, sach hakol. So he comes to the sum total, and he writes over there, instead of the sum total, totaling up all the figures and so on and so forth, he writes sum total, ein od milvado. That's the sum total of everything, the sum total. Now, was he, was this some kind of, he was trying to show somebody something? No, that's the way he felt, right? The way he felt was ein od milvado. That's, if you ask me what's the sach hakol, the subtotal is ein od milvado. That's what it is. And the Rebbe points out in the Sikha over here, he says, that's what he felt. He really felt that. This is the sum total of his business. He was doing business. He was a businessman. He's a wealthy man. Right? He's a wealthy man, and he was a wealthy person, and he supported a lot of other Chassidim and so on. Very generous with his money, but he was wealthy. And didn't get wealthy by being a batlan. But this was his feeling. The sach hakol is ein od milvado. V'hainu sha'inyan da ein od milvado haya chadur b'chol metziyusoi b'chol inyanov. It permeated him through and through, in everything that he did, in everything that he thought, and everything that he was, and all his actions, whatever it is. It was all ein od milvado. Even in his business was based on the premise that ein od milvado, there's nothing besides Hashem. That's all there is. So therefore, when it came to the sach hakol, when it comes to the sum total, when it comes to do with his with business, he wrote the truth, and not just the truth, but the truth of the truth, the ultimate truth, which is ein od milvado. That's the sach hakol. If you want to know what the sum total is, that's the sum total, right? And he meant it. Okay, so we could ask a question, says the Rebbe. Since the whole concept of ein od milvado was so engraved in this person's heart, in this chassid's heart, why did he write it only as the bottom line, right? Maybe he should have written it differently. Maybe the previous lines didn't say ein od milvado. The previous lines were cheshbonos. They were calculations and money and amounts and so on and so forth, with specific amounts. And so why before this did he not bring out the sin of ein od milvado only in the sum total? He should have written it in every line, shouldn't he? So So the Rebbe says, no, Alter Rebbe. That's the Chidush. Exactly this is the Chidush. It's true that for every single Yid who's B'cheseres Kashrus, it's possible for him to feel Ein Od Milvadoi, to be aware of the concept of Ein Od Milvadoi, there's nothing besides Hashem. How? By contemplating, by thinking, by meditating, how everything that there is, Kol hanimtsoim lo nimtzu ela ma'amitis imotzoi. Everything comes from Hashem's true existence, like the Rambam said. Everything's from Hashem's true existence, and similar statements. But for this recognition, there has to be meditation. You have to think about it. You have to come to this concept through davening and through learning and so on and so forth. When a person is separated from the world and he focuses on this thing, then it's not so difficult. When you're in the Beis HaMedrash and you got your talis and your tefillin on and you learn the Maimon Chassidus in the morning and you're focused on the davening and you're thinking about the Eibishter, then you can come to the conclusion, Ein Od Milvadoi, right? The question is, when a person is busy in the world, is the world itself, the world of business, something? Is Wall Street separate from Ein Od Milvadoi? Is Wall Street something outside of Ein Od Milvadoi? And the answer is no. That's exactly the Chidush Rabbi Yomin Kletzker. When a person is sitting in the Beis Medrash, it's easy to think Ein Od Milvadoi, or at least it's easier, right, to think Ein Od Milvadoi. But when he's sitting now in front of his cheshboinus, and he has to run a business, and he has to pay his workers, and he has to pay for the wood, and he has to collect the debts, and so on and so forth, and he's busy involved, and he's oisik in the physical world itself, in the world which is full of tirdos and bilbulim. Tirdos meaning he's preoccupied with the numbers and making sure that everything goes smoothly and making sure it comes out right, and that he's not cheating anyone, and no one else is cheating him, which is not so simple. Right? And he has to focus on it, and he has to be aware of it, and so on and so forth. In that point, if he can think, you know what, Sachakol, this doesn't really mean anything. It's Ein Od Milvadoi. That's the Chidush, right? In the Beis Medrash, not such a big Chidush. Here's the Chidush. When he's busy and therefore, as is mentioned in the writings, in particular the Mittler Rebbe, the greatness of Bala Esakim, people who have been involved in business, they see a greater hashkocha protest, they see the hand of God, so to speak, much more in their daily business dealings than people who are sitting in the Beis Medrash learning Torah. True, someone who's sitting and learning Torah in the Beis Medrash is soaked and surrounded by, soaked through and through and surrounded by inyonim of Torah and so on and so forth. But for such a person, it's not difficult to contemplate Ein Od Milvadoi. But he doesn't see the Ein Od Milvadoi in everything that he does. Why? Because he's in the Beis Medrash. Where did HaKadosh Baruch Hu hide himself? In the Torah, right? The light of Sheshis Yimei Breishis, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that the creation was not worthy of receiving the light of Yimei Breishis, Vayom Elokim Yehi Or Vayehi Or, the or that he originally intended to suffuse into the Metzias, he saw that it wasn't Shaykh. Vayehi Or, it would only be in the future, Vayehi in the future, right? And there was a different or that came out. There was a different or that was embedded in creation. So where did he take that or that he originally intended? Ganza B'Torah says the Zohar, right? He hid it away in the Torah. He hid it away in the Torah. And therefore, you can see that or in the Torah to a certain extent. But the question is, can you see that or that's in the Torah in the world? That's what Ben Yomi Kletzker did, right? And other people like him, not just him. But that's the greatest challenge, to be able to see Elokus in the world. So as the Rebbe says it, you can come to this recognition at the time when you're davening and you're meditating on Elokus, when you're sitting and learning and you're davening. When you're separated from inyonim of the world, but when you're busy with business, that the nature of the world is that these things conceal Al Mitzvah Yisborach, they conceal Hashem's presence, because your focus is on the world, it's not on Elokus. Kashlo lahargish, az zayin and ein od milvado. It's very hard then to come to awareness of ein od milvado. V'zoya hargosha hadgosha b'sipor hanal. This is the emphasis in the story. Shachosid hayaz. That chosid over there, in other words, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, who had the duty of being oisek in his parnosa to provide for his family and provide for many of the Chassidim, in fact. And when he wrote down all the cheshbonis, all the calculations had to be exactly how many trees and how much for each tree and how long each tree was, and therefore how much per foot and this and that and the other, whatever it was, or meter, whatever the measurement they used in Russia, and so on. He wrote it down exactly. It was very precise and everything. He didn't want to cheat anybody. He didn't want to cheat him. He wasn't thinking of God, the greatness of Hashem. He was thinking of Inyonim Ischar, of business. But since he was soaked through and through with this whole concept of Ein Od Milvadoi, even when he was doing his cheshbonis, he came to the conclusion that the Sach HaKol, the sum total, the final tally is Ein Od Milvadoi. That's the tachlis. That's the purpose of his business, right? The purpose of his business is not to make money. The purpose of his business is Ein Od Milvado, and HaKadosh Baruch will take care of all the rest of it. And therefore, he wrote Ein Od Milvado. He wrote with an emes, and that was his intention. Okay. So, any questions? Okay. So, the first concept that we discussed was the concept of Ein Od Milvadoi, and there's a number of different ways of explaining what the inyan means, Ein Od Milvadoi. The most simple and basic and straightforward way of explaining Ein Od Milvadoi is that that's all there is. There's only Hashem, and that's all there is. But then we have a question: how did this world come into being, and what's the status of this world? Do we have a world here, or is it just imagination? So we concluded it can't be imagination that there's a world, because it says Bereshis bara Elokim. The Torah itself says that God created a world, and therefore the world must exist. So what does this mean then, that Ein Od Milvadoi? So we went into a whole explanation of the very fundamental concept in the writing of the Arizal called the Tzimtzum. That prior to the Arizal, this concept of Tzimtzum was not clearly understood, or maybe it wasn't even known at all. And prior to the Arizal, the understanding was that there's a sort of a chaining down, a steady shtalshalut, and eventually you get from Elokut, you get to Oilimus, right? From godliness you get to the world somehow or another, through a long process of chaining down, right? Just like you would get, I suppose you could say something like the condensation of steam, right? You get steam and then eventually it becomes water and eventually it becomes ice, right? If the conditions are right. So, al derech zeh, just as a marshal, as an analogy, that's how they sort of thought of it. Elokus, pure Elokus, so to speak, gets condensed until it comes out as so Arizal said that's not possible, right? Because here you're not talking about steam which becomes water, which becomes ice. You're talking about Elokus, right? It's Or Ein Sof. And how does Ein Sof become finite? How does infinite become finite? Because if infinity is revealed, the finite would automatically be swallowed up into the infinity. It would no longer be finite. So how can you have a world? So Arizal says, no, there's a radical break called the Tzimtzum. But this Tzimtzum itself has several explanations. Is it meant to be understood literally? That God removed himself from a certain area of his creation, right? Into which the creation was placed, so to speak. Did he remove himself? Or did he remove the Or? Or did he not remove himself nor the Or, but he only concealed himself? So that's the explanation that's brought in Chassidus. He only concealed himself and he concealed the Or. I'm sorry. Not he concealed himself. He concealed the Or because he is always revealed everywhere. But of course, since we can't see Atzmus, we're not aware of it. And that is called the Tzimtzum according to the system of the Alter Rebbe. It's only in the Or, but Hashem's presence is there and the Or is there as well. It's only concealed. But it's there for us to reveal it. Now, when a person is able to reveal to himself this concept of Elokus, when he's able to reveal Elokus, he comes to a state of Dveikus, right? Of Dveikut. His neshama cleaves to Hashem. The highest level of his neshama in particular, but even the lower levels of the neshama are able to cleave to Hashem, and that's one of the concepts that's fundamental. We'll talk about later, in later classes, the concept of Dveikut, meditation, Dveikut, etc., etc. However, in this class, we spoke about the idea that a person who lives with this, who understands it, like someone like Benjamin Kletzker, as we just spoke about, feels this is the reality. Ein od milvado. Yes, he lives in a world, and when he does his calculations and his cheshbonos and his he runs his business. He runs his business according to the principles of Torah, and he runs his business honestly, and he doesn't allow himself to be cheated. He certainly doesn't cheat anybody else. And he's very involved in the figures and so on, but he knows that there, underneath it all, ein od milvado, right? Underneath it all, ein od milvado. Now, the next set of classes, when we discuss the pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, we'll discuss the concept of uniting, how it is, how do you go about uniting the physical bria with Hashem Echad, right? With Hashem. So it'll be echad, it'll be essentially one thing. Not the concept of ein od milvado, there's nothing besides him, but how we can see that even a physical creation can nevertheless be understood as part of Elokus. So to the extent that the primary mitzvah of Yiddishkeit is Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. God is one. We have to understand this unity, this oneness of God, and how it doesn't detract from his oneness at all, that there is a physical world around us, and then what do we do with it, and how do we make it work, so to speak, and then eventually in the class after that, the series of classes after that, what are we here for, what are we here to do, and so it goes on.